Greetings and felicitations. This is Michael Haspel, and welcome to Quantum Froth Dispatches. This episode is going to be an interview with upcoming horror author Claire L. Fishback, and I do have a little bit of housekeeping to do before we can get to that, mostly because we had some technical difficulties, because why not, right? The program we were using does an interesting thing where it does a voice over IP, but then records each of our sides of the conversation separately. So during the actual interview, we were having some dropouts and some delays on the voice over IP connection. However, the recordings were pretty much flawless, as you'll hear. But you will hear us at certain times kind of talk over one another because we thought the other person might have been done talking, but in actuality, it was just a dropout. And also you will hear sometimes one of us say something like, hey, you're breaking up or something like that, but you won't hear the breakup. It'll be clear to you. It'll be transparent to you. But I just wanted to highlight that to avoid some confusion. As well, there's this kind of interesting phenomenon happened today on the day that I'm releasing this podcast. The trailer for the Dark Crystal, I think it's called Age of Resistance, dropped today, along with a trailer for Rambo Last Blood. And the reason I call these two to attention is they fit right in with our thesis that there was something in the water in 1982. And 1982 is coming back to haunt us because what came out in 1982? The Dark Crystal and First Blood. So we will explore that more in depth. And I've got some great episodes coming up afterwards, after this one. We're going to talk about Tron and Tron Legacy for the next upcoming one. But besides that, I'm going to be at Denver Pop Culture Con this weekend. So I'll just be wandering around. I'm on a couple panels. Having a good time trying to get a picture in the Iron Throne and score some celeb pics and autographs. So it'll be a lot of fun. But if you see me, come by and say hi. And without any further ado, I give you Claire L. Fishback. 5, 4, 3, hands on keys, turn. Greetings and felicitations. This is Michael Haspel, and welcome to Quantum Froth Dispatches. I have no idea what episode this is. I've lost count, and our numbers are all over the place. But tonight I bring you Claire L. Fishback, who is a horror writer who I believe also dabbles in fantasy. And Claire, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what inspired you to become a writer, etc.?
All right. Thanks for having me on the show, Mike. I have been writing since I was about 6 years old. Basically, as soon as I knew how to string letters into words and words into sentences. And I started out writing stories about like chipmunks and squirrels who were pen pals. I think my first inspiration to write anything like that was from The Jolly Postman. It was a children's book that had like envelopes inside, and you could open the envelopes and pull out the letters and read all the mail and all that. So I did like this little squirrel and chipmunk pen pal thing. And then I discovered Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which is an anthology put together by Alvin Schwartz, collected from folklore. And then he does like these retellings, and they have these really creepy illustrations. There's 3 books in that anthology series. Once I discovered those, I think I was probably around 9 or so. That was it. I was hooked on horror and just started writing creepy stories. 6th grade rolled around. My teacher just kind of was a loser, I guess. And I didn't really like her. And we had to write in journals every day, which was fine with me. But I'm just like, I just want to write some stories. So I started writing scary stories in my journal to freak her out. But she really liked them. So it didn't
Oh,
quite
well,
work
that's
out.
cool.
Yeah, it didn't quite work out the way that I had anticipated. But, that's how I got into horror and really writing. And I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah, and
So,
you've
yeah.
got one book out now called Lump, a collection of short stories, which I
Yes.
got to tell you, I really enjoyed. It was not what I was expecting at all, even though
Which is
it's
great.
but it's like right in the title. It's a collection of short stories, but I just wasn't prepared for maybe how short they were, that they were these little vignettes, and it's like you can just burn through you know, like 50 of them like really,
Right.
really fast, and they were really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I thank you very much for saying that. Yeah, that was a fun collection to put together. I wrote a lot of those stories back in 2007. Excuse me, back in 2007 when I was really active on writing.com. There was a lot of people who had prompt contests, so they would post a prompt and we would go in and write to the prompt, and then it had to be like so many words or fewer or whatever. And I won a lot of those, which, it's just within the writing community on writing.com. So it's not like I have trophies all over my writing room. But yeah, so I decided to just put them all together and see what would happen if I got that out into the world. And it's been well received, I feel like. I guess it just depends
Yeah,
on
it's
what your
enjoyable.
definition of success is, of course. I sold more than one copy to my mom, so so that's success to me.
Yeah, and it's gonna sound weird, but horror fans will know what I mean when I say they're fun. They are creepy and scary and unsettling, but they're fun. So
Yes.
I think you did a very, very good job with that.
Well, thank you very much.
And your second book comes out really, really soon. It's like, I know you've already told me the date like a million times and I keep forgetting it. I just know it's like June.
It's June 21st. We have 24 days left. I'm like freaking out, but in a good way. Every time I go and look and like update my website with little snippets here and there, I see the countdown timer. I'm like, oh my gosh, 24 days. So I just did it today. That's why I know that. But yeah, super, super exciting. I've got boxes of books in my writing room right here. I'm surrounded by copies of my book to take to the book bar for my book launch on June 29th, 3 to 5 p.m. Book Bar, Denver, be there. Um, yeah, so it's exciting to have these, books out in the world, and I'm working on more, of course, because that's what we do, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, in theory.
Right, exactly. Weeks later, I'm finally writing something new.
Well, that is good
Maybe
to hear.
months. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's been a long while for me. It's like it's an uphill struggle.
It
But the Book
is.
Bar is a really good venue to debut a book too. I mean, they really do
Yeah,
it upright.
they
They take care of
do.
people.
They do, and it's reasonably priced, which is one of the biggest reasons why I went with them. There's alcohol right there, so I can have a glass of wine before to kind
Nice.
of take the edge off. And anyone who buys a copy gets a free drink, so that's
Oh,
an added bonus. Yeah, so
they
hang
didn't
on and buy
they
your
didn't do
copies
that for
there.
me.
Well, that's what I set up with them. So
Oh,
because I
okay.
didn't order any catering or anything like that. I was like, I just want to do drink tickets, drink, and I ordered a cake that will have my book cover on the top of it. So, you know, don't
Local
expect dinner.
listeners, yeah, local listeners will also be pleased to know that they have like really good hot chocolate there, like awesome
Ooh,
hot chocolate,
I'm
like
gonna have to
really
try
good.
it sometime.
Yeah, it's really awesome. Now that book is The Blood of Seven, as you
Yes.
said. And do you want to just let us know what that book is about?
Oh gosh, yeah. Can I just read the back cover copy because it's way better than my
Yeah.
pitch that I worked on for years. Okay. Okay, here we go. It says, static filled her ears. Through the crackle, a voice compounded of many voices said, "Protect her. When Detective Anne Logan sees a shimmering vision of a young girl, she tries to dismiss it as a trick of mountain light, but she can't dismiss the arcane symbol that rose like a brand on her chest and burns with life when the vision becomes reality. Then townspeople begin to disappear, and Anne's investigation plunges her into an eternal war between two secret societies, one serving the malevolent designs of a mysterious deity, the others trying to keep them at bay. How can she know what to do, who to trust? The answers lie in the tattered pages of an ancient manuscript and in the heart of the little girl Anne must protect. In the sleepy town of Harmony, Colorado, darkness gathers strength to unleash vengeance upon the world. Can Anne embrace her destiny in time, or will the child of chaos arise? Dun dun dun!
Yes, very, very cool. And it sounds from like the back cover copy like it might be urban fantasy, but this is pretty much horror. Like it's got and I'm saying that because it has elements of urban fantasy in it. You know, it is somewhat like it's got police detective work. It's got the whole secret societies that, you know, become kind of a staple. The town is very much a character, you know, the Harmony. So it does have elements of urban fantasy, but it's when I was trying to like come up with comparison, you know, some comp stories, it reminded me like of The Omen, you know, of stuff like that, which is not urban fantasy. It's like very much horror, you know,
right,
straight up horror.
Yeah.
So I just kind of wanted.
Yeah, I've been calling it supernatural suspense, but horror works too. I mean, I like
It's a thriller
affiliated with horror, so
and it's a
it
thriller
surprises
too.
people.
So yeah. Well, it would surprise people. Yeah. And it's got, you know, when you talk about like the ancient books and everything like that, it does have Lovecraftian elements to it. It sounds like, right? So I'm just using that as a cheap segue into the next question.
Okay.
So what author has influenced you the most and why?
Oh my gosh. My knee-jerk response is always going to be like Dean Koontz. I mean, I'm a Koontz and a King fan. I'm one of those people that can like both, because I know there's like King versus Koontz, who is the better dark guy or whatever. But I started out reading Koontz. I didn't read a lot of Stephen King when I was younger, meaning like in my 20s. I think I tried reading it when I was probably like 11. And I just couldn't. Yeah. I don't even know where I got that book at that age, but I tried it. And back then, my ability to read like really wordy stuff, I guess reading comprehension, was not that great. So I kind of abandoned it. I think around the part with the bird, maybe.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying maybe, which sucks because I just read this book not that long ago for the first time, I might add. So I actually
just
listened
in time.
to it. Yeah, I listened to it on audiobook and had it on my Kindle so I could sync them across. And man, Steven Weber does an amazing job narrating it. It's so good. He does like if one of the characters is like shrieking something, he totally shrieks it, and it's so cool.
Oh wow!
I was like, yeah, I laughed a lot while I listened to that one. But yeah, I mean, my listening skills aren't great, so that's probably why I'm questioning my remembrance of the bird scene. There was a bird scene, right? Wasn't there?
Yes, there was.
Okay. Just making sure I'm not making that up, because I swear to goodness, the book by Dan Brown, Angel and Demons, I thought had a giant, Beelzebub or whatever at the end of it, and it totally doesn't. So I don't know what book that was, but I kind of want to find out because it sounds like a good book. But anyway, what was the question? Did I answer it?
Yeah, like what author influenced you the most?
Okay. So, I mean, the scary stories, of course, the compilations put together by Alvin Schwartz, the first inspiration there. Dean Koontz, a lot of his earlier stuff. I'm not too keen on his newer stuff. I've tried it and it's just kind of goes on. But his earlier stuff, like The Watchers and TikTok, and I can't
Did you
think of
ever
any
read
more at the
Lightning
moment. I
by
could
him?
Google it right now, but if for the sake of time, I'm not going to do that. But those are the two that come to mind right away. Who else? More recently, Shirley Jackson.
Oh,
Her book, We Have Always Lived in the Castle. It's not really horror, but it has like this super creepy vibe to it. When you're reading it, you're just like waiting for something horrible to happen, and something horrible does happen. But the story itself isn't. I wouldn't classify it as horror. It's kind of dark, but it's not like scary, hitting your psychological areas of your brain or whatever. It's just like, whoa, that was a really good book when you get to the end of it. And of course, her short story, The Lottery, can't, gotta love that one.
yes. Yeah.
So,
I'm
yeah.
trying to remember. There was some comedian that I was watching, and his joke that his joke wasn't all that funny, that particular joke, but he kind of just ended it by going, "Don't throw rocks," and I couldn't stop laughing.
Yes. It's little
It
things
was
like
so
that when
wrong.
like these super subtle references to things like that. I love that type of thing. It's great.
Yeah, and I meant to ask, did you ever read a Dean Koontz book called Lightning?
Ooh, what was it about? If you can just give a really brief,
Oh
because I read
man,
a ton of his stuff.
I'm trying. This is one of those books that I do not want to spoil remotely, right? Even though
Okay.
it's probably 30 years old now. It's about a woman who I believe is an author, and this guy keeps showing up and protecting her throughout her life, and he never grows old. And he like saved her when she was like 8 years old, and she keeps showing up throughout her life. But every time she sees him, he's wearing the same clothes and looks the same. And it's fantastic. And it was this book. My mom was really big into Dean Koontz, and she was just like, "You would love this." And I read it, and that's what introduced me to Dean Koontz. So I was like,
I
"Wow,
have
this
not
is
read that
amazing."
one, but I'm going to have to check it
But
out
yeah,
now
check it out if you have not read
because that
that.
sounds really
It's
cool.
his older stuff. It's older
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, which is
Um,
his good stuff, honestly.
mhm. And we'll jump. I just recently did, and I know you're one of the 1% that like doesn't watch Game of Thrones. Um, but I just did a podcast about Game of Thrones and like people not liking season 8 because it changed, because essentially they went from pantser to plotter.
Oh yeah.
So are you a pantser or a plotter? And just quickly for folks who might be listening to this for the first time, a plotter is somebody who plots out everything, has the ending figured out, has all the story beats figured out. And a pantser writes by the seat of their pants. That's why it's called pantser. And doesn't have anything planned. This kind of goes where it goes. So
Yeah, a pantser is not someone who runs around pulling down people's pants.
no.
Though sometimes I do that, so watch out.
Okay. Fair warning.
Never say full Monty around me, okay? Just saying.
Okay.
I'm a pantser at heart. And I would love to be a plotter because I feel like plotting would help me write faster. But then it's like, but that's not how I do it. And every time I try to plot something, it turns out being very, for lack of a better phrase, by the book, I guess. It's just like,
Okay.
okay, this happens, and now this happens, and now this happens. And I get like trapped into like the illusion that the plot that I wrote out is in stone and I must follow it. So if I veer off on a little, rabbit trail to see what happens over here, it's like, okay, that was fun. Now let's bring it back here, whether it connects or not. And every time I try to plot, and my sister is usually my twin sister is usually my first reader for anything. She's the only person who gets to see my first drafts. I send it to her and she's like, meh, because she can tell right away if I plotted it or not. In fact,
nice.
the very first version of The Blood of Seven that I wrote back in 2007 was called The She, and I plotted that. It was a very different book back then, by the way, and I'm actually kind of thinking about like bringing that one back out and redoing it completely because it was actually kind of cool. But anyway, I sent it to my sister and she didn't like it. And this was the first time ever in our entire lives that she didn't like something that I wrote. And it was because I plotted it and it was too like bump, 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 the end. It didn't have it didn't have the organic, emotion or the feeling of discovery. Like when I write a story from scratch, without plotting anything, there's that magic of discovery while you're writing that is just so wonderful and makes it so when I take my dog for a walk, I I figure out like major plot points if I'm stuck, I tell my dog, okay, Belle, at the beginning of the walk, this is what we're thinking about today. And at some point during the walk, I have like a major aha moment. And that is so exciting to me that when I plot stuff out, if I have an outline, it's just like, okay, magic gone. Why am I even going to write this book? Because it's already there. It's just, it loses the fun. The fun is gone. It just doesn't work for me. So the downside to that is that it might take me another 11 years to write the next book. I'm trying not to let that happen because I don't want to be that jerk, where people are like, okay, where's your next book? And then I lose all these fans because I say all these fans because I just have so many. But yeah, I don't want to do that to my readers. So I'm trying hard. Unfortunately, I am not working on book 2 as much as I really want to. For some reason, book 2 is just like, I have ideas for it, but I can't, I'm paralyzed by the fear that I'm not going to write anything good, which is so stupid when it's a first draft thing, because your first draft is supposed to be crap. You're supposed to give yourself that permission to suck and just put garbage out there, like, probably 200,000 words of garbage that you'll end up rewriting into, 90K or so, depending on the genre. So instead I'm working on something completely different just to get back into it. Cause it's been probably 2 months since I've written anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I might say from my own experience that might be the wiser course right now, rather than directly writing a sequel, which doesn't seem like it makes sense. But from a business marketing kind of standpoint, it, like what happened with me is I wrote essentially 2 sequels, and then the publisher didn't want them. So I was like,
right.
Groovy, I get to rewrite these. And
yeah. You're like, oh, I wasted my time.
Yeah. So lots,
but not really, because your writing is brilliant. So whatever.
Well, we're going to try to recycle those and make something productive. I got a couple of questions though that you raised up. So when you're going on a walk with Belle and you come up with a killer idea, which is always where you come up with it, or in the shower, or when you're driving,
washing the dishes, or
right.
Yeah.
What method do you have to record that idea so that you don't space it and you're like, oh, I had the best idea when I was on the walk with Belle, and it's gone?
I take voice notes on my phone. So, I mean, not like a voice memo, but I open the notes app on my iPhone and I do voice to text, which sometimes results in some really interesting. I have a sample if you would like to hear one. This was supposed to say, they suck the souls out, but it says, please F fudge, whatever, but the bad version of fudge, please F the food out. Luckily, I remember what I was saying by the rest of the context of the note. But I mean, if I had just said, they suck the souls out, and left it at that, it would say, please F the food out. And I would be like, what the heck did I mean by that? So yeah, I do that because when I walk with Belle, I try to be present, like with her, which sounds really kind of like granola hippie-ish, but I've read so many different articles about how to tell your dog that you love them without, yelling it in their face or whatever. And one of the things is to, pay attention while you're walking with them and not be on your phone the whole time and that kind of thing. And so I just, like, while she's sniffing around in the grass, I just whip my phone out and just record the note really quick. She doesn't even notice.
Nice. That's pretty cool. Um, Let me see. Another quick one that's because see some of these like I already know the answers to, and I'm like I don't know if that's gonna. So that's why I have I have this list of like 100 canned questions that I came up with. So I just try to find the ones that are going to be the most interesting.
Right,
Um,
and you know me, so you can
yeah.
probably figure out which ones will have some interesting answers.
So how because you don't plot things, right? Because you're pantsing, how important is research to you when you're writing the book?
I have different markers for different things. So while I'm writing, if I find something that I need to look into, instead of like opening up my web browser and going and looking at it right away and then falling into a million different rabbit holes, I just mark it. And then I know at the end of when I'm done writing all the way, I can go back and like look for those markers, like just search for them and then find
Mm-hmm.
them like, okay, I need to research this because I'll put the marker and then a note, make sure that this is accurate, that kind of thing. And then close it off with the same marker. And that way I can find all those marks very easily at the very end and then go and do
Oh,
all the research.
what characters do you use as your markers? Just
I actually just use two capital I's in a row
oh.
because there are hardly any words out there that have two I's in a row. I tried to like implement something a little more sophisticated, like like a less than sign with an R for research, or a less than sign with an I for more info needed, or something like that. But to me, the double I, it just works, or Roman numeral two, if you want to say that as
Right,
well.
yeah, but it's
But yeah, it
super
just
easy to
works.
find. Yeah.
Super easy, yeah. Unless I'm writing about Hawaii a lot, I guess,
Yeah, that's that would kind of mess you up.
yeah, a
Um
little bit.
so do you have a set schedule that you write to, or um do you try to like wait until the muse hits you, or
When I am actually in writing mode, um, which I have to like tell myself, I've been basically in resistance mode for the past 2 months, just like reading books about writing, and just
yeah, take a moment
dorking around.
to explain resistance to people.
Okay, so resistance to me is like, oh, if I read this book about developing characters, even though I fully well know how to develop a damn character, then I'll be a better writer for it. Oh, if I read this book on, XYZ, then I'll be able to incorporate that into my book. Like I spent, I think, the whole month of March or April reading portions of the Nag Hammadi scriptures, which are featured in The Blood of Seven, to find ideas for the sequel, which actually I did find ideas for the sequel in that, but the spark to look in there came from a passage in The Blood of Seven that one of the characters like reads from the scripture, and I was like, oh, where is that? I need to find that one because that's perfect for my next for the sequel. And I ended up reading like a whole bunch more than I needed to. So resistance is basically anything except writing, but it's
Yeah.
it's things that like you feel like you're you feel like it counts as writing because you're doing writing like stuff, like reading writing books or doing research or whatever, but it's all just resistance. Anything that keeps you from doing the actual writing, resistance. And so I had to like pull myself out of that last month after I read another book on writing, and I just told myself, you know what? We're just going to go for it. We have a basic idea. I talk to myself like that. We know what we're doing. We have a
it's
basic
a
idea.
it's a royal we.
Yes, of course, of course. Um, and even still, I read I just started reading Pet Cemetery for the first time, and in the intro to the version that I have, Stephen King talks about why this book was not one that he really wanted to put out there because it was one of the darkest ones that he wrote for him because of some of the things some of the things that happen in the book almost actually happened to him in real life.
Mm-hmm.
And so this in his introduction, he explains that this is the what if story that resulted from those incidents. And I was like, I need to write a story about an incident like that has a what if. And so I started writing this new story. It's actually based on this house that my husband and I stayed in Buena Vista or Buena Vista in Buny last year for my birthday. It was it was this grubby little farmhouse, and the people were like, "Oh, it's rustic, so don't expect it to be fancy." And I'm like, "Okay, fancy and dirty are two different things, or fancy and clean rather are two different things." It was disgusting, okay? But when we first got there, it was very charming. There was no Wi-Fi, no cell service. We're basically like cut off from the world, which was great. But yet, a mile or two down the road, you could get cell service, whatever, or even at the end of the driveway or something like that. So in this house, there was a stairway that was like covered in old newspapers, like Mod Podge newspaper articles on there. None of them were like creepy articles, which I was really hoping for. Like, ooh, they're all about murder. These are all the murders that happened in Buny in the past century or whatever. But no, they were nothing cool like that. It was mostly just like, here are the social events in the 1930s or whatever, which was still kind of cool. But up these stairs, okay, you get to the top and there's a little table with a couple chairs and like a puzzle. Okay, cool. But lining the walls were all these little doors, like almost like cupboards, but bigger than cupboards. And some of them had latches to hold them shut or hold something in. I don't know. My horror brain just like went wild. So, of course, naturally, I want to open one and see what's in there. And so I, of course, went to one that had a latch. I'm like, oh, what's in this one? And I opened it and it was just like so pitch black in there. And I have like a major aversion to super, super darkness. It just scares the crap out of me. If I can't see what's going on like right in front of me, it's terrifying to me. It's a fear of the unknown, basically.
Yeah.
The same goes for like swimming in open water. There's no way in hell if I can't touch the bottom, I'm not going in. Unless I'm wearing like aqua shoes or flippers, something to cover my feet. Because for some reason, it's the vulnerability of my feet dangling down there that just totally freaks me out. So I opened this cubby and there's just like pure darkness. And I slammed it shut right away. Like I didn't even like get let's take a look and see, turn on my flashlight on my phone and take a peek. No, I just closed it and lashed it and ran. But later I took a picture of it and I went along my merry way. And then I was looking at the pictures later and I didn't realize it, but there is like a really creepy reddish stain on the outside of the door that almost looks like fingerprints, like someone had like smeared blood on the door.
Oh, wow.
And I hadn't even noticed it before. It was just when I like scurried back up there just to take some quick pictures because it was so weird. And then looking at the pictures later, I did not get the best shot that I wanted of that whole room, which would have been great for the cover of this collection of stories I'm working on that relate to this whole creepy room with all the doors. But I don't know, maybe we'll have to go back and just risk it. But yeah, this house was just it was crazy creepy. At night there was like thumping upstairs and scratching. I mean, obviously mice, rats, whatever, probably raccoons, who knows, but I did not sleep hardly at all the whole time we were there. And we were only there for 2 nights, thank goodness, because I value my sleep so much. If I can't sleep, you don't want to be around this when it hasn't had sleep. So yeah.
Yeah, and I find myself like when you talked about your swimming in open water, I like immediately my brain goes to the immediately like worst case scenario, and it doesn't even have to be real. Like
oh no, it's never real. No. It's never real.
Yeah,
for
my
me,
wife.
It's like, oh, there's like zombies under the water, and they're gonna swim up and grab my feet. Or, there's like a demon show. During a windstorm one time, we had this big spruce tree out front, and it was just brushing the window. But to me, it sounded like an old lady zombie shuffling down the hallway in her slippers. So I'm just like panicked, like staring at the doorway. Because one of the scariest things to me too is I'm always afraid I'm going to open my eyes and in the doorway see like a figure standing there. And I actually have these like really lucid dreams like that, where they come into the room and I flail around like, trying to wake up my husband, like, wake up, Tim, wake up. There's somebody in the room. And then I actually wake up. So it's like a dream within a dream thing. I have those so often that I'm just like, please don't let me have another one of those. But they're terrifying. Anyway, so yeah, I like lay awake with my eyes wide open, staring at the doorway, waiting for this old lady zombie to shuffle by in her slippers.
Yeah.
And it was just a tree. Yeah.
For me, it sounds like we have different experiences because, like, for me, when I wake up from a nightmare, and when I say a nightmare, it's not what I would call a nightmare. It's what other people would call a nightmare. A nightmare for me is like being like I'm dreaming that I'm at work, like in a meeting. That's a nightmare. You know. But if there's like monsters or something involved, I'll be terrified and wake up, and I'll just be like, "Oh man, that was like the best dream ever."
Oh yeah, totally. Once the initial fear settles, like, oh, I gotta write that down.
Yeah. Exactly.
Totally.
So what do you think? I mean, obviously you're involved in like, supernatural thrillers and horror and all that stuff. What do you think makes this particular genre special to you?
To me, I don't know. I don't know if this is what makes it special, but every time I try to sit down to write something that takes place in the normal everyday world with no monsters or anything, there ends up being a monster or a ghost or, a demon or something. I think it's something to do with like, who wants to read about the everyday world? I want to read about, creepy stuff that people then, fight and hopefully they overcome it. I think deep down it's about overcoming my own fears and my own anxieties and stuff like that. I know for The Blood of Seven, Anne is grappling with survivor's guilt after the last case that she was on. Her partner and the last victim died. That's not a spoiler. It's just part of we know that basically right away. But and part of her story is overcoming that and the anxiety that comes with that when she's now in charge of like protecting this girl and all that. And that's it's just like just writing who you want to be, who you wish you could be type of thing. Like I have all these ideas to write this story about this feeble chick who, like, in her mind she has like this alter ego that'll just like shoot some fool on the spot if he mouths off at her or whatever. But in real life she's not like that. So it's just I don't know. That really doesn't answer the question whatsoever. But I think I don't know. I think it's supernatural stuff is just fun and it's cool and everybody's doing it.
Yeah. And I kind of have the same problem. It's as far as like the supernatural tends to like creep into the stuff that I write. Like no matter what, I'll just be like, oh, this is supposed to be this kind of story. And it's like,
exactly.
All of a sudden you're like, now there's aliens.
Yeah. Not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens. Exactly.
Yeah. Let me see here. When you do sit down to write, like, do you have how hard is it to actually start writing once you go, okay, I'm going to plot myself in front of the computer for the next 2 hours or whatever and write? How hard is it from like that blank page to the words start flowing?
So I have a day job, as a lot of writers do, because you got to pay the bills somehow. And I write on my lunch break, which is 1 hour long. Oh. So I have 1 hour to write as much as I can. And so I don't really give myself the freedom to just,
yeah, you don't have time.
I really don't. And I could write when I get home, but by the end of the day, I want to get some exercise. I got to walk my dog. We got to make dinner. I got to hang out with my husband. He needs attention too, whatever. So, I basically do not have the liberty to just sit there staring at a blank page. So sometimes what I do is I'll go back and read the last, I write in Scrivener. So each scene is its own little file. And I go back and read the end of the last scene, or sometimes even the whole thing if it's not that long. And then I'll just get going and be like, okay, this is where I want to go. As a pantser, I don't have any way to know. Sometimes at the end of a scene, I'll be like, okay, I'll put some keywords at the end, like, okay, this and this and this are next. And sometimes this and this and this happens, and sometimes it's that and that and that instead. So it just depends on where the muse takes me. But yeah, like I said, I don't have the liberty to just stare at a blank screen. I have to get cracking, or else I'm never going to write anything.
Yeah. And this, you pretty much kind of answered my next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So it's like, a lot of us believe that like a lot of your creativity, etc., writing comes from like your subconscious mind,
Mm-hmm.
that some people call the muse, you know. Do you use any techniques / rituals? And I don't mean like arcane rituals.
Well, I sacrifice a goat at the full moon of every month, but I drink its blood, eat its heart, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you use any kind of rituals just to get to prime that, to get in touch with your subconscious?
Yeah, so there's a book called You've Got a Book in You by Elizabeth Sims, I think. I'm like looking at it, it just says Sims on the spine. And she talks about getting into garret mode. And the garret, I think, is like that little attic area in the top of some old houses. So that's where you go up in your garret and you write. So my garret mode is turning on this this track. It's called Creative Brain Waves or something like that. It's ocean waves with, I think, alpha or theta waves in the background that you can't really hear, but it helps trigger your creative mind. And as soon as I turn that on, it's like, it's go time. I used to try to associate smells with my writing time, because I have one of those Scentsy wax melter thingies in my writing room, but I never write in my writing room. I'm always at work when I write. So it's like I go into this really plain, nondescript drop-in space at work, bare walls, a tiny little circular table in the middle, maybe 4 chairs. And I just like, oh, which chair should I sit in? Ooh, that's like the biggest choice I have to make when it comes to my writing time, is where to sit. And I was recently telling Wendy Tarian and Ellis Hawker about this. Sometimes I pick the room that has the stapler, but I don't let the stapler distract me. It's broken anyway. Like, do like T-Rex with the stapler.
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually holding my stapler right now doing that, as if you could see it. Yeah, so that's where was I going with this? Oh yeah, garret mode. So I always say writers don't deserve windows because we get distracted so easily.
Wow.
So I go in this little room, and with my back to the door and to the big window, and I just sit down and I stare at a blank wall, kind of like Wilson Fisk in Daredevil. Yeah, I don't have the cool backstory to go with that, but yeah. So that's my garret mode. Is just the ocean waves and the non. In fact, today I had to go. The 2 rooms that I usually have a choice of were both full. So I'm like, where am I going to write? So I went to like option number 3, which is in a completely different location in the office. And that one was full too. I was like, oh my gosh. So I had to like actually go and write somewhere else today that had windows. And I was like staring out the window.
Oh.
And I was like, this is why I don't deserve windows.
Now, that kind of intrigues me, because I kind of have trained myself. When I sit down to write, the way to tell my brain that it's right time, is I listen to a track called The Intro by The X, and I try to have the first, I write with playlists. And so the first song on every playlist is Intro by The X. And I try to write, have the first words by the end of that song. This track, Ocean Waves, that you're talking about, like where would somebody find that?
It's in iTunes. If you go to Brain, and also if you go to, I think it's brainsync.com, I can get the link for you to put in your show notes or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's Kelly Howell. It's called Creative Brain. Oh, I have it right here on my phone because I was just listening to it earlier today. What do you know? It's called Clear Wave Creativity, by Kelly Howell. It's brain sync. Excuse me. It has alpha waves, supposed to unlock your creative mind. And it just works for me. It just triggers. All right, get to business, get to work. Time to be creative. Yeah.
Yeah,
Even if what I write is
that's very
complete
cool.
rubbish, it still puts me in the right
Hey,
mindset. So
it's words on the page, and it's like I don't even remember.
exactly.
Yeah, I don't remember where I heard this, but it was just like in order to have quality in your writing, you have to have quantity to your writing, or the other way around. No,
I'm
I think
sorry,
that's the
you
right way.
totally cut out at that point. I
Oh
did
yeah,
not
yeah.
hear the full quote.
I think it's something like if you want to have quality to your writing, you have to have quantity to your writing.
Ah, yes.
And so if you,
Yep, the whole thing when you're a pantser is I write 120,000 words to get, 50K.
wow,
That's
yeah,
not really true.
no,
Usually it's I
no,
write
but
50K to find the story and then I go scrap all that and start over.
yeah, yeah,
Which is also sad.
which is also sad. It's, um, and it's like it takes about the same amount of time if you're a plotter or a pantser. It just
Hmm.
depends on what order you do things.
Yeah.
So it just, but it takes about the same amount of time. What would you say is like the hardest thing about writing?
Probably the editing, like the first round of editing after I've, barfed everything out and it's like massive and unorganized and horribly messy. Just that first round of piecing it together and making decisions. Because sometimes I'll have a scene that at the end of it says, okay, no, you have to go back and change XYZ in that previous chapter or whatever. And maybe by the time I get to the end, I'm like, well, what if I want to go with that original way? Because it was kind of cool too. And having to make those kinds of decisions is really hard. And I suck at self validating and like deciding. So I thought like figuring out, okay, which thing is worse, being eaten by a lion or having your arm cut off by a bear trap? Which one is worse? I don't know. I can't figure it out. Obviously, being eaten by a lion, because then you're all the way dead instead of just your arm is gone. So, but I have a hard time like seeing it that way. I don't know. It's weird, um, but yeah, that first round of editing is the hardest.
All right. So now the
Absolutely.
opposite of that question. What is the easiest thing for you about writing?
Oh my gosh, the easiest thing is coming up with ideas. I have so many ideas and just no time to write them all, or they're not, idea enough to be a full novel or story. It's just like, oh, this would be cool if this happened. So yeah, just I mean, the ideas. Dialogue I think comes pretty naturally to me because I listen a lot.
Hmm.
I'm an introvert, so like in meetings, I listen and I observe people a lot instead of talking. I don't even ask questions in front of other people. That's how introverted I am outside of like my group of friends. Because when I'm with you guys, it's like I'm not an introvert around you guys.
No, not at all. That is not that is not how I would
Unless I'm
describe you.
hungry. Unless I'm hungry, then maybe a little bit quieter than usual. But yeah, so I just, a lot of listening, I guess, helps with dialogue.
Yeah. So let me see here. You've already answered a couple of these questions because I'm like, oh, I already know this and I already know that, so I'm not going to ask you that and everything. Um,
Right.
Now we did talk about you having nightmares and having frightening dreams and stuff. And have you ever taken like a dream slash nightmare and just kind of used that in a written piece? I suspect that some of the ones in Lump might have come from that.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure. I can't specifically say which ones in Lump came from nightmares, but I'm sure a few of them probably did. I write them down if I feel like there's something there. Sometimes my nightmares, this is going to sound really weird, but sometimes the scariest dreams I have are just a bunch of people yelling about different things
Mm.
and like just noise, like noise pollution. It drives me insane. So a lot of the time it's dreams about that. But one of the nightmares I had actually in that creepy little house that we stayed in, when I thought it was a raccoon up in the attic tromping around in like combat boots or whatever, I thought it was like my brain for whatever reason was like, oh, it's a rabid raccoon and it's gonna come down the stairs and Bella's gonna go after it. She's gonna get bitten, but it'll be okay because she has her rabies shots. But then I fell asleep and I had like this horrible nightmare about some rabid dog getting into my mom's house, and my mom has like cats and birds and a dog herself and horses and all this stuff. So um, in this dream though, the dog had like ripped all the feathers and the skin off of her bird's wings.
Oh.
And so I know this may be unsuitable for certain audiences. So in this dream though, I'm like, my whole family is there, which we're like scattered hither and yon, but we're all there together for some reason. And I'm trying to get people organized. Like, okay, you guys are going to go take the bird to the vet. And then, at some point my mom also got bitten by this rabid dog, and I'm going to take mommy to the hospital, and I'm trying to get everyone organized, and everyone's like not listening to me, and they're all yelling.
Yeah.
And it was so frustrating. That was like the worst nightmare ever.
Yeah. And that's
yeah.
That's like a universal thing. Cause like, screenwriters that's like one of the things, that's a crutch that screenwriters will use. Cause that's not really a phobia, but a common like trigger for a lot of people, that people are not listening to one another and they're just talking over one another and everything. And so they'll do that on, like Lost did that every episode.
Totally.
The best example of that I can think of is actually in the remake of War of the Worlds with Steven Spielberg. There's a scene where Tom Cruise is with his daughter and his son in the car, and all three of them are yelling at one another, and none of them are listening to what anybody else is saying. And it's a crutch. It just ramps up anxiety in people. So note to folks that are listening out there, if you want to just ramp up the anxiety in your story, that's a cheap trick you can use.
Yeah. Have everybody yelling about different things and nobody listening.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
That'll do it. Now, Lump is your first published book that you came out with now, but but it's not your first book. I mean, obviously, since you've been writing stories since you were 9 or 6.
6. Yeah. Well, I mean, technically, yeah, 9. We'll go with 9 because then that's why I, started writing horror or whatever.
Yeah. So, what, like, how many novels or did you try to go with before you settled on this one? Before you finally got this one out?
Right. Let's see. I did NaNoWriMo for 10 years.
Wow.
Successfully. So I have at least 10 novellas, I guess. But a couple of years I shot for 100K.
Nice.
So I have a couple of novels there. I have, I would say, gosh, I don't even know. Probably 10 or 12 to 15 novelish length manuscripts hanging out.
Wow. That is really, really impressive.
Thank you. I think I did a calculation a couple years ago, and I've written well over 1 million words. Because I think there's some quote out there: "You have to write 1 million words before you're any good." I was like, "All right, done. I must be good now." I don't know.
and you have kind of a real world horror story, because when I heard this, I freaked out. Where you had like your laptop stolen or something.
Oh my gosh.
This is truly horrible. So brace yourselves, people.
People, do not put all your eggs in one basket. And I'm not talking about eggs. I'm talking about your computer and your jump drive that you back up your computer to. So I had this little netbook, cheapo little computer, but I used it for all my writing, and I would back it up to this jump drive, which just conveniently fit in this little pocket on the case for my netbook. Well, I had both of those things in my car in a bag, and we were meeting our dog trainer at the dog park to do some leash aggression training with our dog, because she doesn't like other dogs when she's on leash. Beside the point, but whatever. So I was like in a hurry to get out and get her unloaded and start, doing some attentiveness stuff with her to get her prepared. Totally left my bag on my front seat. In plain sight, went and did the training for an hour, came back, my driver's side window is smashed, and my bag is gone. And I had not backed it up anywhere else ever. And I think I've actually been able to piece it together
Oh, that's good to
From
hear.
like old, yeah, because recently I looked in my files and I was like, I basically recovered most of it from emails that I sent to people that had some of the stories attached to them, and from old floppy disks and CDs and stuff like that. I did put together quite a bit of it, I think.
Yeah, that's
But
good
at
to
the
hear.
time, at the time, I was devastated and I felt so violated, first of all, from having my car broken into, and then having, I had to cancel all my credit cards, get a new driver's license. So the next day I took off from work and I was like, I have to go get, so my current driver's license is from that same day.
Oh,
And
wow.
my face in that picture, you can just tell that I was just like not quite right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I ended up telling myself to get through it. Everything before now was trash. It was practice. So now just go out and write more stuff and it'll be even better and all that. And I think one of the biggest parts about that was one of the versions of the what's now the Blood of Seven was on there, and I had just finished editing it, and I
Oh,
didn't have any other copies of it.
oh,
And editing isn't just, oh, let's put a comma here or take a comma out there. It's rewriting whole passages
yeah.
and making it even better. So yeah, that was like the biggest, most brutal part of that whole thing was I had and in fact, I think after that, I didn't touch that that book for a couple of years because I was so just upset about that. And
Yeah.
then I ended up rewriting it anyway. So, and now it's an even better book, and it'll be out in June.
Yes,
Woo!
and it's very, very good. It's very good.
Thank you.
um,
Thanks.
and we are coming up on an hour, but I have a couple other questions, and these are hard. So I'm just giving
Okay.
you
Oh
giving you
boy.
fair warning here. So people often like gravitate to different interests and stories throughout their lives. So like, what story do you feel it most influenced you as a child, and then as an adult? And it doesn't have to be a book; it could be any story, like film, TV show, whatever.
Oh my gosh, that is a hard question.
Yeah.
Well, as a child, I would say The Jolly Postman because that is what really inspired me to start writing. Um, as an adult, I'm gonna just go with We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson
Oh,
because
nice.
that book I read it last year or 2 years ago or so, and it just like completely changed. It changed the way that I was approaching the project I was working on at the time because the I was working on this book that was influenced. It started out as one thing, and then I watched a couple different TV shows, and you could tell that those influenced it.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
had like,
Yeah.
yeah. So and that book is so simple. It all takes place in like this house. It's, I mean, it's simple in its complexity, I should say, because there's a lot of layers to that story, but yet it's like straightforward and like you don't have to have, a million different things going on to make a good story. It can just be about these people that are coping with life and all that. And so it made me really look at that project I was working on and completely revamp it and figure out a different direction to take it in. And I think it's going to be a lot better for it someday when I actually finish it and it comes out.
And I think I know which project you're talking about, and that was already really good. So,
Is it photos?
yes,
Photos in
yeah,
darkness?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to seeing where you take that. And
Yeah.
that kind of introduced a new question for me, because you talked about how these what you're watching or reading starts to influence your writing. And I
Mm-hmm.
totally had that happen to me. I had in some rewrites, and I won't say what scene it is in Graveyard Shift, but there was a scene that like, and I needed to turn it around very quickly. We were going back and forth with the editor, and it is totally The Wire. Like when I reread it now, I'm like, oh, this is not even my character. Like this is The Wire.
Oh yeah, totally. I am so easily influenced by even the books that I'm reading while I'm writing. Like sometimes I feel like I'm adopting that author's voice, so I have to be really careful with. Like I'm kind of leery to be reading a Stephen King book right now while I'm writing something new, but I think I can get past
I
that.
almost feel though that
because he has a very distinct voice.
Yeah, but I almost feel like he's a good kind of neutral person to read, because even though he does have a distinct voice, it almost changes from book to book and from style to style, because he writes in so many different genres. So
That's true.
I don't know. I definitely picked up a Stephen King like vibe. Not, it's not like fanfic or anything, but there were definitely moments in Blood of Seven where things were going down. I was like, oh, yeah, this is really bad, and I could totally see it in my head. And I'm like, well, if this was a Stephen King movie, this is what it would look like,
Oh yeah. Well, when I write, I see it in my mind as a movie, and I try to like translate that to words, which is really hard sometimes. It's like, how do you describe this, the feeling that this crescendo of music is going to cause, and you told me once, you can't do jump scares in literature. And it's true. Like, I can try all I want to do jump scares in my writing, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so just, sometimes I will read the book version or the book and then watch the movie and see, okay, how might they have translated this? But then I get all caught up. I'm not good at analyzing movies for story. I get so caught up in the movie that I'm just like, dang it, I was supposed to pay attention to this. Oh, well.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you could write any other book other than yours, you know what I mean? Like, which book would you pick that you wish you had written?
I know I'm on this whole Shirley Jackson thing, but it's totally We Have Always Lived in the Castle.
Okay.
That book is just so brilliant. It really just hit home with me, and I want to read it again just to see exactly why. Maybe like try to analyze it while I read it. Again, like with movies, I have a hard time analyzing books for story too. I just want to know what makes it just do it for me,
Oh, yeah.
I can't figure it out. It could be the language. It could just be this. She's just so subtle about, okay, something really weird happened a few years ago, but we don't really know what it was, and we don't really know who did it. And I think by the end of the book, you still don't know, but you don't care because it all comes together so brilliantly.
Oh, nice.
That, I don't know. Yeah. Have you ever read that book?
I have not, but I just wrote it down so that I can put it in my queue.
Okay, yeah. You got to read that one. And then let me know what you think, because there's just something about it. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, because I like books that are like that are like mystery, creepy. I don't know. It's weird. And I know you've experienced this, but like what other people call horror, I tend to laugh a lot when I read. Like, except for like serial killer stuff. Like that stuff will freak me out. But if I'm like reading, any kind of supernatural horror, at the horrible scenes, I tend to laugh. And it's not because I find it funny or I'm trying to like mock it. It's basically because I think it's like brilliantly done. Like a perfect example I can use is the trailer for It Chapter 2.
Oh my gosh.
And that was so scary, and it was just a trailer, but I was laughing all the way through it. And when you see her like watching her from behind and bending over just weird.
Oh God.
I was like
cackling.
Right? I was laughing so hard because I was like, oh my God, that is so freaky,
Yep. I totally get it. Yeah, definitely. If it's super well done. I mean, I don't laugh, but I'm a cringer, so I like cover my mouth and like, the blanket is up around my face just in case I need to cover my eyes, because yes, I write horror, but I also cover my eyes sometimes when, things get brutal. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah. So is there anything you want to talk about that we haven't really covered yet?
I think we covered it all.
Yeah. I'm sure
we're good. Yeah, I think
as soon as we hang up, we'll be like, "Oh, wait a minute, I forgot to ask her."
Yeah, exactly.
So tell people where they can find you online and when your book release and everything is again.
All right, I have a website. It's Claire L. Fishback. fishback.com. I'm on Facebook. I think it's at Claire L. Fishback. I'm not very active on Twitter, but I am on there. It's the same at Claire L. Fishback. And then Instagram, which is not Claire L. Fishback, it's at Mrs. Fish 2009, I think. I know I should probably have it at Claire L. Fishback, but I didn't know how to change it, and now it's like all over the place as that. Yeah. So I think it's Mrs. Fish Face 2009.
Okay.
I'll have to look. I'll let you know for sure. You can put it in the show notes.
Definitely.
Or whatever. So yeah, but I mostly hang out on Facebook. So find me there, follow me there, however it goes there. Yeah.
Great. And your release is the book comes out the 21st.
Sorry, yes.
The 21st, correct?
21st. Yes, the 21st of June for the Blood of Seven, and then the launch party is on the 29th at Book Bar in Denver from 3 to 5 p.m.
There you go.
There will be cake and drinks.
And if you buy
free drinks for everyone who buys a copy.
Everybody who buys a copy gets a free drink. So that's incentive right there. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Claire.
Thank you for having me.
You have been listening to Quantum Froth Dispatches by Michael Haspel. Music and other cues are provided by The Fat Rat. The song you're hearing is Monody, featuring Laura Brem. If you would like to support the podcast, please visit www.patreon.com/QFD. Thank you for listening, and we now return you to your mundane reality.